we can. I know darn well we can work it out. Oh, yes, we can. I know we can. Yes, we can. Oh, why can't we if we want to? Yes, we can. I know we can make it work. I know we can make it if we try. Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Great gosh, your body. Yes, we can. I know we can.
Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen, for part 2 of my special interview with Clinton E. Galloway. Clinton E. Galloway. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Drum Capital Corporation, and he is also the author of 2 books. Join the show right now. Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. My fascinating guest here today is here for part 2 of our interview with Mr. Clinton Galloway. I've already introduced him to you earlier, and you know who he is. We're picking up on where we left off. He is the author of Anatomy of a Hustle, Cable News Comes to South Central Los Angeles, and we discussed that book at length in our last segment. And so right now I'd like to talk a little bit more about his book, What Did You Think Was Going to Happen? Mr. Galloway, welcome back. When did you write this book? What did you think was going to happen?
I wrote that book in 2021. Okay. It was really meant to be a follow-up to show what the effects are of the behavior that the city had shown to us over a period of 20 years. Mm-hmm. The results are what you see in the book. A lot of it is about the economic development that never occurred. Mm-hmm. Another part of it is about the moral values that we could not put in our children because we did not have control of the media that controls the moral values that go to our children. And it's not just our children. It happens the same in all communities. Mm-hmm. Media has become the power to decide what the values are for any young people. Mm-hmm. We did not have access to that media to put some of our values. So the gangs ran rampant. That's part of the reason they ran rampant. They were providing economic resources that we could not provide. But we had offered to provide over 5,000 jobs in the South Central community as early as 1981, but they were denied. So if you're going to invest $50 million and provide 5,000 jobs, and they tell you it's not worth it, so they said, we're not going to allow you to have it. So what did they do? They gave it to a friend of theirs, Eli Brode, who was a rich West Side developer. How he knew anything about South Central, there was only one bidder when it came back. Because the big companies would not touch it because they saw the corruption that was going on here. Mm-hmm. Time Incorporated had a cable television company who actually bid in the original bidding process, but they decided they were going to get out and never come back because the corruption was so rampant. They tried to force Time Warner into giving them a bribe. And Time Warner says, we don't do it and we're just leaving. They pulled their application. Wow. But what we're talking about in the second book is really the effects of what happens when you don't have access to the technology, because we were denied access to technology at the new technology, at the beginning stages in 1980. That technology could have morphed into what we saw into internet because cable television would provide access to the internet without a computer. And that was well documented as early as 1979. So these things were part of the technology phase that we missed out on and our children did not have access to. So they could not get the level of education that others got because we could not access technology, which was being used heavily to provide education. Another thing that I saw was really how people have become with the level of violence. I have a chapter in that book called Juvenile PTSD, because what's happening is our children are being traumatized by the levels of violence that go on in our communities without having the ability to get any sort of mental health issues solved. Mm-hmm. We have no mental health facilities in South Central. And the children are coming up, and when they come up with PTSD, the other things that happen from violence to schizophrenia to all sorts of mental illnesses become rampant in our community. And if we don't think this is an important issue, how is it that you think a man who's 25 years old, who's armed with a tank and has machine guns on his arm, can come back to the United States and have PTSD from what he's seen in Iraq?
Right.
We live in a war zone in our communities.
Right.
The children see people shooting machine guns into crowds randomly. Right. And this traumatizes these children, and we can't get them the mental health. And we pretend it's not going on. We pretend it's not a mental health issue. It is a serious mental health issue that will perpetrate itself for a period of years unless it's dealt with at a young age. When they're 16, 18, and they've had PTSD for 5 years, you got a problem. It's going to be hard to control these children. It's hard to get them back. Right. We have to get the children between 10, 11, and 12 years old to let them know that there's treatment for the problems they're seeing. That's what we have to do.
Right. Well, I certainly respect the power of media. That's why we started this podcast. And I can tell you that years ago, I read a book called Mind Control. And it's not some conspiracy theorist type book. It is a book written by an African scholar. And it was talking about the power and the effects of media and what we see and what we allow into the ear gate and the eye gate over a period of time. And it probably would coincide with your chapter on juvenile PTSD, because certainly what we see and hear affects us. I mean, all of this rap music, and I've learned to, calling women bees and things of that nature. I mean, when I was a kid, I never heard a woman called a bee in my lifetime.
You couldn't say it.
Thank you. And now
my parents would not allow it. Slap me silly.
Yes.
Of course, you can't slap kids now. They slap me silly for having said such a stupid thing.
If you look, the thought, I mean, and all of this stuff that has been normalized because of what we have allowed into our homes through the media. So it's absolutely asinine. It's ridiculous. Let me ask you, when all of this was going on, or even since it has taken place, you said the Congress voted and Joe Biden led this vote. I mean, have you ever had conversations with people like Congresswoman Maxine Waters about this kind of issue?
We talked with Maxine Waters in 1981 when this was all going on. Maxine told me to my face, there's nothing I can do because I serve the Democratic Party and I don't serve you. Mm-hmm. So when she said that, it made it quite clear what her position was. She said, of course, if you want to take my husband in, Sidney, and give him a little bit, I wouldn't mind. But the fact was, she made it quite clear that she was not doing anything, and she didn't feel like she had the authority to do anything. Okay. This was a matter that was in the city, and she was not a member of the city. Mm-hmm. At that time, she was an assemblywoman in the state. Mm-hmm. But, Maxine's been in power for 40, 45 years?
Right.
What's improved in South Central since Maxine's been in power?
Okay.
I haven't seen anything.
And let me ask you.
That's just me. That's only an opinion.
We're all entitled to our opinions. So let me ask you this. If Karen Bass wins the mayoralty, do you think black people will be empowered in this city?
Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. I see her a little more as a female Tom Bradley. Okay. She's not going to do anything that's going to empower black people because the city is not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. And the mayor is not really a very powerful person in the city in reality. Okay. The city council runs the city. Mm-hmm. But the city has shown itself since 1986 when we brought back a Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. They're not going to do anything. That was an empowerment right there when the Supreme Court said, you have to let these people do it. Mm-hmm. They did not allow us to do it because they said empowerment is something we're not going to allow in the community because then they will start thinking for themselves and they may not vote for the people we tell them to vote for. So it became an issue of who's going to control the community. The community control went to Eli Broad in West LA, who was a billionaire, but they never built anything. And he sold it to another multinational corporation who ended up taking control of all cable in Los Angeles. Mm. But black people never had the access to it. And they didn't have access to it in New York either, because I grew up in New York. Mm-hmm. And Percy Sutton got a franchise, and he sold it a year after he got it to Time Warner. So no one could.
Back in the day, did you ever try to discuss this with Robert Smith to see what he would think about it?
No. Okay. We had enough troubles on our hands dealing with everybody we were trying to deal with. Mm-hmm. And, we had to continually maintain our capital base. Right. Because every year they say, well, do you still have the capital? Mm-hmm. Yes, we've still got the capital. We've still got investment bankers out of New York who are willing to underwrite our deal. Mm-hmm. And so we made sure we kept all of our capital and all our investors in line and in place. So each year they would say, oh, well, we're not going to give it to you, but we want to make sure you've got your capital available. Mm-hmm. So we always kept capital available.
So it's almost like they were hoping that you didn't have your capital so they could use that as an excuse to not.
Exactly. Right. And part of the thing about being in federal court is it's an expensive process.
Yes.
Again, we spent several $1 million between filing the case with this Consuelo Marshall, an appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, an appeal to the United States Supreme Court, and then coming back and spending 6 years in her court. Our legal bills were over $2.5 million. They got $1 million, which was really they bought them out cheap. Mm-hmm. But what else could we do? There was nothing that we could do about it at that point. Mm-hmm. So we simply accepted it. And again, after you get sick, your concerns all these things are human concerns. Right. My concerns were about life. Right. And I thank my Lord for allowing me to have another year of life. And every day I give thanks because I came back close. My brother did not get through it all. Right. So we give thanks for where thanks is deserved to our Lord. And that's the most important thing to me. So these issues are important because I still see the suffering that people are going through in South Central by not having access to the technology that other people in the country have access to. You see, they passed a law recently. We're going to give $60 billion because the digital divide doesn't allow poor people to access cable. They don't allow access because the prices have been jacked up so high by the monopolies you created. Right. And now you want to complain about the monopoly getting monopoly pricing. That's what monopolies do. They get monopoly pricing because you protect them, and they pay you to protect them. That's how it works. And so many industries that black people were prominent in have been taken away from them. The gypsy cab business, where we had to call cars because we couldn't get cabs in our communities.
Right.
And they took the car, said, you can't do that. So they would seize the cars and seize the people. But when Uber and Lyft came in, all of a sudden private cars were okay.
Right. Absolutely.
But when other people were doing it in minority communities, it wasn't okay. And so they wouldn't allow it. And they would literally take these people's cars from under them and seize them for illegally violating the rules about taxi cab. Because taxi cab companies said it's not okay.
Wow.
But when Uber and Lyft came in with more money, they threw the taxis under the bus. They said, okay, we don't care about you guys anymore. Well, we've got Uber and Lyft, and they've got deep pockets. And they do. And that's what it came. Deep pockets by government.
Wow.
And that's what we are. Government is purchased just like a commodity.
Say your brother's name again for my audience.
Dr. Carl Galloway.
Dr. Carl Galloway. I believe in the power of the spoken word, and I think
I appreciate it.
The great man you've described. His name deserves to be spoken again, and I believe.
And he was the first one to see this. He was the first one to see the benefits that could accrue from cable. When he first told me about cable, I said, "Who's going to pay to watch TV?" And he said, "Trust me." Then I was in investment banking, so I talked to our analysts in New York. They said it's a tremendous growth field. But I was skeptical when he first told me, but he was a bright guy.
So he was a visionary.
I listened to him, and he was my big brother, so I had to listen to him.
Right, and a visionary. Ladies and gentlemen, my fascinating conversation with Clinton Galloway will continue right after this. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching my interview with Clinton E. Galloway, a man who knows money. And I need to meet a man like that because Yes We Can Worship Center houses the homeless and we feed the hungry. And maybe Mr. Galloway can help us to build some affordable housing right here in this city. All things are possible to him that believeth. And sometimes you meet people for the right reason. And this is a Holy Ghost hookup. I want to thank God for Valerie. I want to thank God for my dear friend, Frank Gooch. And I want to thank all of you who are watching. If you would like to help us build affordable housing, if you would like to help us house the homeless, feed the hungry, keep the podcast going, do me a favor. Stop what you're doing right now. Go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. Scroll down, click donate now. Send your $50,000 donation, $5,000 donation, $500 donation, whatever it is. No donation is too large or small. And you have my word that we will use this donation to make a difference. We need your help, ladies and gentlemen. We need your help right now. Let's get back to the show. Okay, thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. My guest is Mr. Clinton Galloway, as you know, the author of Anatomy of a Hustle and What Did You Think Would Happen? Now, these books are available where, sir?
They're available on Amazon and in many bookstores.
Okay, all right.
Mainly it's all digital these days, so,
right.
I tell people Amazon and Barnes & Noble has them also. So they're available widespread throughout the country.
What about the Black Bookstore here in L.A.?
I've actually done a speaking engagement at S1 Books regarding Anatomy of a Hustle. They were kind enough to allow me to do a speaking engagement there, and we had a full house.
What was the name of this place?
S1 Books in Leimert Park.
Okay, great, fabulous. So
they were very kind. They took on the information, and they will allow me to have a large speaking engagement there where people got to understand what went on in regards to the book.
Shout out to them.
So S1 Books was really, and I hope they can continue to exist. These days, everything is digital, so,
Right. Well,
brick and mortar stores are tough.
My organization, Yes We Can Worship Center, we house the homeless, we feed the hungry, and I have a service every Friday night that is actually growing, and I have a lot of pastors that come. I'm going to get you to come one night, bring your books, and let's talk about them there. This has been very, very eye-opening to me, I tell you, and it's great to know, but sort of discouraging, because it sounds like to me what you're telling me is that institutional and systemic racism is still alive and well.
Absolutely growing in Los Angeles. And all this talk about empowerment that's having about because the Latin people have said something bad,
right.
It's not going to happen because unless you get integrity in the government, and we've seen how much corruption goes on in the LA City Hall, because 3 of the 15 city councilmen in the last 2 years have either been indicted or convicted of crimes of office.
Right.
And now we've got 3 more who are clearly announced racist. So we've got racist and corruption. So 40% of them are either racist or corrupt. Wow. What does that tell you about a group? I don't think I can put a lot of faith in that group. I put my faith in capital. We're doing we're doing affordable housing now with my investment banking firm.
Wow. Well, I'll have to talk to you about that sometime
That's
because
another story. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off of
no,
that.
but we have to, because I house people through other organizations and I've done it for 6 years. My dream, my vision has been to build our own affordable housing special projects right here in Los Angeles for some of the people that we help. And maybe I can talk to you about that someday. But tell me, what do you think? So since we recognize and realize that institutional and systemic racism is alive and well, my question to you would be, because I always thought and sort of in the back of my mind that there are three forms of power: God power, which is the ultimate power, our creator, our King of kings and Lord of lords, and then there's money power, and then there's people power. So it sounds like to me that in the 80s, even with $50 million, you still could knock down the walls of systemic racism and things of that nature. So if you were speaking right now, Mr. Galloway, to a student body at Morehouse in Atlanta, my hometown, by the way, shout out to the ATL.
I spoke there about the book.
Wow. Okay. All right. So, but my question would be to you, in my journalism, wearing my journalism hat, my question to you would be, what is the solution to this kind of institutional racism?
And from my perspective, the solution is capital.
Okay.
We live in a capitalist society, and we must use our capital effectively, not merely spend it, but use it to invest in our own communities and in the things that we think need.
Okay. Let me cut you off right there, please. Because now you're talking. Now that's music to my ears. I've been dealing with my church lately, Mr. Galloway. I've been saying to them in one of my messages, I talk about that a lot of times preachers, we will say, if you come down and put $20 on the altar, God's going to give you a blessing, and this is a blessing plan. I tell people that if you give me $20 for a blessing plan, I got the blessing and you ain't got nothing but the plan. Okay, and also I tell them, you follow me? And a lot of people will say, lay your hands on that car and claim it, name it and claim it. I tell my people, name it and claim it is over. You need to start learning about interest rates. You need to learn how to get your credit score up. You need to learn, which is what I'm doing right now myself. We need to learn money because black people for far too long have been financially illiterate. We don't know money.
We haven't had access to the information, and when we tried to bring access to the information, it's denied. We cannot do it without access to media.
Yes.
So capital is key, and the utilization of that capital. We have plenty of capital in the black community.
Yes.
The black community would be like the 7th largest economy in the world.
Yes.
If we put it all together. We spend money because that's what advertising and media shows us.
Yes.
Spend, spend, spend.
Yes.
We take that capital and make an investment, and you see what can happen.
Yes.
A lot of good things can happen. But one thing I want to make sure people understand.
Okay.
If you're doing capital, to all extents possible, minimize your involvement with government. Because whether you're talking about local level, federal level, or any other level, this basic corruption, when people sit in office for 8, 10 years, 20, 30 years in Congress, this basic corruption, they're not going to be caring about what happens to the community with the capital you're putting in. We've tried to put in $50 million. They told us we can't do it. Who ever heard of such a thing? You can't put $50 million into a poor community?
Mr. Galloway, right before the pandemic hit, we were scheduled to receive, Yes We Can Worship Center, a large grant from one of the granting organizations, I'll say, in Los Angeles. And then the pandemic hit. True story. About 2 or 3 weeks before the pandemic hit, I was at a press conference with Hopics and a lot of other organizations. Eric Garcetti was there, stood next to me, shook my hand, told me he'd heard of my organization and the great work that I do because I'm on Skid Row every day. I'm the preacher in the suit who's actually there, getting my hands dirty, doing the dirty work. This is Eric Garcetti said this to me.
Yeah.
And do you know that a few months later when the pandemic hit and I was protesting in front of the mayor's house, you might remember the story, pastor arrested in front of the mayor's house, and they charged me with stalking, not protesting. And of course, the DA didn't pick the case up, and I'm suing them now for that. But I'm going somewhere with this story. So the pandemic hits, and we did not get the grant. And this was not a governmental organization, and I didn't know how we were going to make it, but we made it by the grace of God. But I remember when the pandemic hit and all these guys were applying for these PPPs and all this other stuff that they have for churches. Do you know that God spoke to me as clearly as you're speaking to me right now and told me, don't take none of the money. And to this day, Yes We Can Worship Center did not receive a dime from the government because I was afraid of it. And I can tell you that several of my friends are facing federal prison time right now who took some of that money. And listen, maybe a couple of them were corrupted, maybe not. But I know one or two who I know were doing the right thing. But they got caught up in that corrupted government, and they are facing federal time, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars right now trying to defend themselves. But when you said that about minimize your involvement with the government, it just woke that up in my head, and I had to say.
I'm going to tell you this real quick.
Go ahead.
I had the same issue about the pandemic, and they were offering money for loans and payback, employee payments and that sort of thing.
Right.
I said, look, I don't need it, so I'm not going to take any of it.
Right.
I said, but you're entitled to it.
Right.
No, I don't need it, and I don't want any involvement with government because
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And I can afford what I'm doing, and
Right.
my people are still working, so it's not an issue.
Right.
And I'm glad I didn't.
Right.
But
Right.
just what you said.
Right. That's right. That's right. Well, look, I needed it, but I still didn't take it because I believe in doing the right thing, and I also know that when people have something over your head, they have it over your head, and sometimes
Right.
they give you enough rope and hope that you hang yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, for my final segment, we'll be back right after this. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are concluding our interview with Clinton Galloway, a money man who knows capital, and we are glad to know him. If you'd like to support this podcast, if you're enjoying this positive programming that is coming on Apple Music, Spotify, on YouTube, Facebook, and on my website, yeswecanworshipcenter.org, you can send a donation today to help us keep the podcast going. Go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. Scroll down, click donate now, send your donation no matter how large or small. If you want to send it the OG way, just want to mail a donation in, mail your donation, mail your check, make it payable to Yes We Can Worship Center. Send it to 5857 South Central Avenue, Suite 180, Los Angeles, California, 90001. Now, let's get back to the show. Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen, with my fascinating guest today, the author of 2 books, Anatomy of a Hustle, Cable Comes to South Central Los Angeles, and his second book is What Did You Think Was Going to Happen? Both of these books are available widespread in local bookstores, and where most of us get our books right now is Amazon.com. Clinton Galloway is my guest, and this has been very eye-opening for me, and I'm going to share this with pastors, the president of the BMC, K.W. Toulis. I'll be calling him later today to talk about this, former president, Dr. L.A. Kazee, and many, many pastors that I deal with. And I am rough around the edges, Mr. Galloway. A lot of the pastors respect me now, but they didn't like me in the beginning because I would talk about the fact that we raise all this money in some of these big churches and don't do anything for the community. And I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't stand for that. I don't agree with that. My church ain't that kind of church. To be honest with you, Yes We Can Worship Center was organized 6 years ago. Do you know, Mr. Galloway, up until maybe 7 or 8 months ago, I spent more money on my service than I had coming in through the offering because I help the people. I can't have anybody coming to my church who's hungry and I don't feed them. I can't have anybody coming to my church on the bus and I got a Bentley. I just don't believe in operating that way.
Not right.
And I
But
do.
let me say this.
Go ahead.
The Baptist Ministers Conference in 1981 supported our position about bringing cable television.
Wow.
Frank Higgins was the president of the Baptist
Higgins,
Ministers.
okay, yes.
They supported us wholeheartedly and gave us all the support that you could possibly get. And the mayor and everybody continued to ignore them.
Wow. Well, with that in mind, then we got to have you. K.W. Toulis is our president now, and I spoke with him as recently as last week. We're gonna have to have you come to the BMC and let's revisit the issue and talk about the book and sell some books. And I want to bring you to my church because again, I not only do I want to talk to you about the books, but I'd like for you. We can change the world one person at a time, one church at a time, one organization at a time. And I want you to help my people because I got some young people who are sitting on a fence right now. They could go either way. And I'm trying with my limited knowledge. But what I am is I seek knowledge and I read. I got a book right here I just bought 2 days ago called Leaders Eat Last. I read books every day. I am a bibliophile, if you will. But I want you to talk to our people about money because black people I read a statistic once that said the Jewish dollar, I don't know where it is now, but it said the Jewish dollar stays in the Jewish community for 30 days. It said that the white dollar stays in the white community for 7 days. It said that the black dollar stays in the black community for 6 hours.
That's about right.
Gone. And then it's
and
gone.
If you can't develop the businesses that provide the capital and you spend money on, how much money is being spent on cable television in South LA today? Billions of dollars a year.
Wow.
Billions. But we have no access to it, so the capital flows out of the community into the hands of the rich.
Wow. I can't.
And generally, most of them are Republicans.
Say it again.
Most of the people who control cable television companies are Republicans.
Aha. Okay, that doesn't surprise me. My dear friend is attorney Frank Gooch, and Frank Gooch introduced me to Valerie, and Valerie introduced me to you. So say a little bit about Valerie. How did you meet her?
I've known Valerie for 35, 40 years. We first started, she worked for an attorney in an office that I shared with that attorney in downtown Los Angeles. And she was always so knowledgeable and so caring about what went on in the community. And I was privileged to have met her mother when her mother was still at the Carson City Council before her mother went to Congress. And so Valerie has always been a person who always understood what was important and kept her focus on values. She came from a family with high values, and she has high values.
Yes.
And in doing that, you want to align yourself with people with values because that makes you keep your values high.
Thank you.
And so I'm proud and honored to have known Valerie and spent time with Valerie over many years. And I don't want to tell you how many years because then she's going to be mad about telling how many years I've known her. So
we don't want to get in trouble now. Did you ever meet attorney Frank Gooch by any chance?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No, I haven't. I've heard his name mentioned many times, but I have never had the opportunity to meet him.
Well, Frank
but I will tell you, I did meet Valerie's mother, and she was one of the kindest, most caring people that you would not even expect to be in politics because she had a genuine concern about what went on in the communities that she served. And that was rare to see, and I was honored to know her during her lifetime.
Wonderful. And what was her name?
Juanita McDonald. She was a congressman out of Carson area.
I believe in calling names. And shout out again to Frank Gooch. Frank Gooch is a successful real estate attorney, one of the few guests that I've had on the program who, after being on the program, sent a large donation to Yes We Can Worship Center to help us house the homeless, feed the hungry, and to keep the podcast going. So shout out to you, Frank. He's my de facto programming manager because he's gotten me maybe 10 guests or so, and he's trying to get a huge name for us right now. But I'll tell you, this has been very eye-opening, Mr. Galloway, and I salute you, and I appreciate the fight that you put up, and I really respect and salute the great work that Dr. Galloway did. He sounds like an awesome man, and it seems like a lot of that rubbed off on you.
Good guy.
And I know you miss your brother.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the people because you put out the information that people need to know.
Okay.
And it's only with knowledge that you can expand what you're doing and be able to appreciate what goes on in this world. You're providing that knowledge, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. The pleasure is mine, and I'm going to have you back again. Did you send me those books?
I haven't. I'll get them out today.
Okay, and when I read those, I'll have you back then. And any ideas that you have, just give me a call. But I'm going to have you at Yes We Can Worship Center on a Friday night, very very soon. We're there from 7:00 until 8:00. My service is never any longer than 90 minutes. I don't believe in all day.
Okay.
It don't take all day to get.
I like that.
Okay, right.
It would be a privilege to be there. I would be honored to be there.
We're going to have you there.
Everything that I've accomplished in this world has been because the Lord allowed me to. And my life exists because the Lord gave me today. And I thank the Lord for this day.
And look at how he connected us through this Holy Ghost hookup. And here we are putting the information out there, and we don't know who's going to see it. We don't know whose life it's going to affect. There are young people who watch this podcast, black, white, Hispanic, Jewish. The chairman of my board of directors, Mr. Galloway, is a Jewish lawyer from Sherman Oaks. I'll tell you that story some other time,
right.
But I know he's going to be fascinated to see this show. And so for those of you politicians who watch, and I know Ms. Bass watches, and Rick Caruso watches also, institutional and systemic racism is a alive and well in this country, and it is a sick evil that we need to do something about. And this politics, as usual, needs to stop, and somebody needs to do something. And the more we educate ourselves and read these books by great people like Mr. Clinton Galloway, Anatomy of a Hustle, Cable Comes to South Central Los Angeles, and his other book, What Did You Think Would Happen?, the better equipped we will be to do better in the 21st century. And Mr. Galloway, anything you want to say before we go? Last words.
I just want to say one thing.
Mm-hmm.
As we look at what the people are talking about downtown in the city, if you are not willing to abide by the United States Supreme Court rulings, there is no law. And so you can't tell me about any laws you want to pass if you don't abide by the United States Supreme Court and the Constitution of the United States. And that's what you have taken away from the South Central community and from me. But I only represent a community. The community can't put up $50 million. I was able to on behalf of the community. But if you don't listen to the United States Supreme Court, you cannot tell me you are legally justified in your position. That's it.
And that sounds like this ex-president we have, Donald Trump, who really flaunts
exactly
the law every day. You know, if we have no rule of law, then we have no democracy and we have no country. And it sounds like to me that L.A. definitely did not respect the rule of law after that Supreme Court ruling that you all got. We will talk about it again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Mr. Clinton Galloway, and he is a fascinating man and author, and I promise you, you will see him again on our program. I want all of you young men, young women, old men and women, brothers and sisters to know that if we come together in this great nation under God, we can make a difference. We can do it together. Yes, we can.
We gotta help each man be a better man with the kindness that we give. I know we can make it. I know that we can. I know darn well we can work it out. Oh, yes, we can. I know we can. Yes, we can. Oh, why can't we if we want it? Yes, we can. I know we can make it work.